I had an interview with Max Verstappen within the first 5 minutes of entering the paddock.
Frustrating though. I mean, for Oscar, just playing that long game and being patient and knowing, no matter how unfair that Monza call was, the pit stop call last season, if he was to do anything rash, it would just harm his future.
Carbone Beach, which is an event that happens at the Miami Grand Prix. It's a very, very high ticket price, I will say. I've been there on the Sunday a couple of times and we've seen the race winner pop by. I mean, Lando came after his very first win. I was chatting to, Travis Kelce, and it's a real sort of who's who of the celebrity world.
Women are not just interested in beauty and makeup. So it's really exciting for me to see other brands that are considered more male brands to be backing women and hopefully putting their money where their mouth is.
I would love to see Formula One do more in the merch space. I know there's merch everywhere, but I don't want to be wearing team merch that looks like I'm trying to be part of the pit crew. Where are all the pet accessories, the team branded dog collars, things like leads? Oh my God, you could just go crazy there. So
That's a great free idea for somebody who's listening to this podcast.
So hello and welcome back to Away We Go podcast.
Are you ready?
And it's lights out and away we go.
Hello, and welcome back to Away We Go podcast, a Formula One podcast that goes beyond the track limits to talk about travel and lifestyle surrounding the sport. I'm your host, Dianne Bortoletto, and I've got a very special episode for you today. I'm really excited. Well, firstly, to welcome back Ciara Gillan from Formula Live Pulse, my regular co-host on race weekends. How are you, Ciara?
I'm good, thank you. Glad to be back. Happy to be back.
Fantastic. And we've got joining us is Emily Selleck. Emily is an Australian Formula One journalist based overseas. Welcome to the show, Emily.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm actually at home in Melbourne right now, but yeah, ordinarily based over in New York, but very, very excited to be here speaking with you both.
And your job title might say, for a long time it said journalist, but you're transitioning out of journalism, well, maybe still doing journalism, into brand strategy. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. Making a little bit of a change. I've been in media for about 10 years. I've been in F1 for 4 to 5 years, but before that, did a bit of everything from politics, crime, business, all the way over to fashion, lifestyle. I just saw the Devil Wears Prada movie. It reminded me I started my career in the fashion closet, which is very, very different to Formula One, but really brought all those different aspects of, lifestyle, culture, business into what I was doing in Formula One reporting, really focusing on the intersection of motorsport and sort of everything else that's sort of surrounding F1 now that it's become a bigger part of the zeitgeist, if you will. So moving more into the brand side, helping brands within the F1 ecosystem tell their stories and really maximize value, not only for, teams and the brands themselves, but also for, fans and people experiencing, perhaps their first F1 race or lifelong fans. I think it's a really, really interesting time to be a part of the F1 ecosystem. It's very dynamic. There's lots happening. So really, really excited.
Oh yeah, what a time to be in Formula One. I mean, excuse me, the last 5 years, the sport has just gone absolute gangbusters. How did you get your break into Formula One though? Through journalism. I mean, just talk us through those steps. And you mentioned fashion and lifestyle, and you've done politics and all sorts of things. But how do you get from that to Formula One?
Yeah, it's a good question. I feel like everybody has a different path to F1. So growing up in Australia, my family were huge motorsport fans. I grew up on the Gold Coast, so there was an IndyCar race there for a long time. So sport and motorsport was always a part of my life, but I didn't actually intend on making a career out of Formula One. As I mentioned, did a lot of other things. And when Drive to Survive was really having its moment, F1 was becoming a bigger part of the culture, is when I realized there's probably a bit of a gap here to start covering F1 and, reach people who might have watched the show or might be sort of interested on the outskirts, who haven't been that historic target market for F1. So I was lucky enough to have an editor at the time who was supportive of me doing some F1 on top of my regular job, which was very pop culture and lifestyle focused. and, went into the paddock knowing absolutely nobody, but had, a really great experience building up my contacts, and everyone was really supportive. And there are lots of other really fantastic women within the sport who really helped me understand the ecosystem, because it's very, very different to anything else. I mean, I've covered everything from the Super Bowl to the Oscars, and F1 is so unique in terms of the nuance of the paddock and how it all operates. So yeah, I was really, really lucky to have people who were supportive of me following that passion, and then eventually moved into working in F1 more specifically.
Yeah, that's awesome. I just love the camaraderie, especially between women in Formula One. I feel like the support is just massive, and like a rising tide lifts all boats, right? And it's just so nice to feel that. What was your first time like in the paddock?
Yeah, so my very first race working in the paddock was here in Australia. It was, gosh, probably five years ago now, and I had an interview with Max Verstappen within the first 5 minutes of entering the paddock, and it was still sort of coming off of COVID. It was coming off of Abu Dhabi 21, actually, so it was a relatively quiet paddock at the time. There weren't too many journalists, but it was so interesting seeing how everything operated in a way that, like, everyone knew what they were doing, everyone had a place to be, and you kind of just had to watch people around you and figure out, where to go, how does this work, what is the vibe of the press conference, for lack of a better word, because it is quite different to other sports. It was really, really overwhelming, but so exciting as someone who's, a big fan of sport. I think it's interesting going from that perspective of watching these people on TV to then, interviewing them and being in the same room as them. I mean, I've worked in celebrity and pop culture for a long time, so I've done, a lot of red carpets and had that experience, but it was really, really exciting. And I think there's still always an element of that when I attend a race weekend, particularly the starting grid. Like, you'll never, ever get over how exciting and cool that experience is. So it's nice to sort of maintain, that aspect of excitement even when you're there working.
And, like interviewing Hollywood stars on red carpets and things like that, to interviewing Max Verstappen, was there any element of you that was starstruck, or any element of you that was like, pinch me now, look where I am, I can't believe I'm doing this? Or is it all get the job done, and none of that kind of personal excitement enters your brain?
Yeah,
Like, how do you operate?
I would say for me, Daniel Ricciardo was a massive pinch me moment, because I grew up, watching him and had that nostalgia and that real, Australian support. So that was definitely a big moment. I think now that I've been in the sport for a few years and we're seeing the rookies come up and, younger athletes, I will say it is very interesting getting to an age where athletes are all younger than you. I think that dynamic has flipped a little, being with Kimi Antonelli. I've interviewed him quite a few times, and I feel like he's a little brother almost. But I do think there are always those celebrities, if I were to interview, let's say, a Taylor Swift, I've been a big fan of her forever. I think that would be a real pinching moment. But for, a lot of celebrities, when you're there to get the job done, I think there is, you're there to be professional and to get your story. But someone like a Daniel was incredibly exciting.
Now, have you spent much time with Oscar?
Yeah, so I met him for the first time when he was still in F2, and it's been really interesting to watch his rise over the past couple of years. I mean, it's been incredibly quick how we've seen him progress. Something that I'm just so impressed by is, he's not punching walls and, yelling and screaming when he has a bad race or, a bad result or something happens. And I think it's a bit of a discredit to him when people describe his demeanor or whatever as like robotic, because I actually think he is an incredible role model, particularly, for young athletes and young people who are watching the sport. He is one of the best drivers in the world. He's the highest paid Australian athlete, and he's getting the job done, without yelling and screaming. And I actually don't think there are many athletes at the top of their game who have that level of, composure and is so cool and calm. And so it's been really, really interesting to watch how he's been able to maintain that, just no matter what his, results look like.
We were talking about Isaac Hadj's outburst when he went off in Miami. early on in the race. It's just interesting how different drivers handle their emotions really, really differently, privately, publicly, how they process all that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I ask, while we're talking about Oscar, I totally agree. I think that Oscar's temperament is a credit to him. I think he's such a talent. I 100% agree that it's happened so fast. I'm curious, okay, obviously you're an Aussie, but do you think he has the makings of a champion?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it was a real shame to see what happened last season, but it's a 24 race calendar, I guess, 22 in the case of this year. And, you have to be on the top of your game for the entire run. And I think he was able to take a lot of learnings from last year. We've seen him sort of shake up his team a little bit. He's really come into this season with a cool head. I could see him as a world champion one day. I think it would be, obviously fantastic for Australia. Being here for the AusGP was really cool to see just how much the support for him has grown over the past couple of years. And as I said before, I think it would be, great for young people who are watching the sport to see someone like him on that top step of the podium.
Yeah, 100%. I think, yeah, I 100%, like, I'm a big fan. So I agree with everything you just said. And I'm not even Australian. So, but I do agree. I do think it would be great for the sport, for Australia in particular. But then, like, question for you then. Do you think, is there anything that you would like to see him do more of in order to become a champion? Because obviously you've interviewed champions, and you see the temperament that they have or the things that they've done. Is there anything you would, if you were able to give him advice, what would you think?
Oh, that's a good
Or
question.
just in just thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it has been quite interesting to see the way that he's been contrasted to Lando, with Lando being the sort of like emotional person and Oscar being, stoic. But I do think he manages his emotions in his own way. And I do think there sometimes has been calls for him to sort of change like how he's approaching things and reacting to things. Gosh, I don't know what advice I would give him. I think he's doing a really good job, to be honest. I think he's got a really good team around him, and he has had a good team since his junior career. He's just brought up one of his engineers he worked with in F2. He'll be traveling around to all of his races with him, and he obviously brings his, family out to some races, and he has that really good support network. Yeah, honestly, I don't know what advice I'd give him. I think he's doing a really good job.
Yeah, I mean, I do too. There is a little part of me that thinks he might need to be a bit more ruthless in when it comes to his teammate and what decisions are being made with regards to two of them in a race and just kind of, because I do look at like the previous, the Maxes, the Lewis, the Alonso, like they're very single-minded people. And I think Piastri has a natural talent. I saw it when he first, what was it, his rookie year, he won a sprint, or maybe it wasn't his first year, maybe it was his second year. But like for me, that just screams talent and screams a champion in the making. But I do wonder if he needs to be just a little bit more, okay, this is what I'm going, but maybe not, we'll see. Like, I mean, to have led 15, was it 15 races that he won and was leading last year? Like, that's so impressive. So maybe not.
Yeah, I think he's in kind of a tricky position with McLaren because they obviously were banking on Lando being their world champion for so long. And I don't think anybody expected Oscar to be where he was last season. And so there's a lot of, politics that I think both him and Lando sort of have to be, doing internally. And I think the machinations there are quite interesting. I have been quite impressed by the way that the team has been able to maintain a level of harmony, which I do think, you look at, as you mentioned, like a Lewis and, his like rivalry with Nico, which obviously ended in flames, if you will. So I think it is tricky because there are times where I think that too, that Oscar could be a bit more ruthless, but I do think there is an element of playing the long game with McLaren and not burning bridges. And so it is a tricky dynamic that I think he is navigating quite well.
Frustrating though. I mean, for Oscar, just playing that long game and being patient and knowing, no matter how unfair that Monza call was, the pit stop call last season, if he was to do anything rash, it would just harm his future. Hard for a hot-headed Italian like me to sit back and watch. I've got to say, yeah. When I'm like,
Yeah, I've been watching some races in Australia with other Aussies and definitely hear that kind of sentiment being yelled at the TV.
Oh yeah, yes, we talked about that a lot last season, but I shall not bring up the PR words here because I just cannot deal with that again. Okay, so now to you, Emily. So look, tell us with your F1 journalism career, has it always been freelance? Have you been on staff with any publications? Like, just talk us through, yeah, your career journey there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started off on staff where I was working predominantly in pop culture and entertainment and that sort of world. And so I was doing F1 coverage for the sports team, but also writing about F1 through that entertainment, pop culture lens. And it was around the time of the inaugural Miami Grand Prix. So, I mean, that was an incredible race weekend because I sort of had a mandate to cover it from that celebrity entertainment angle. But over time, I then moved into working for a more niche motorsport publication. And so I would go to races and be focused more on just the sporting angle. And over time, I've always really pushed for that, cultural lifestyle coverage just because there is such a market for it. I think particularly with younger people and more women becoming invested in the sport, I think women in particular are so dynamic in terms of the way they interact with sport that they want to know about different aspects of, what's happening in the paddock. And more recently, I've been doing some freelance work and then, moving into a slightly different role within the paddock in the next couple of weeks. So it's been a really exciting journey.
Where's your passion? Like, is it the intersection of culture and Formula One, or is it, brands and sponsorship? Like, is it just the sporting reporting? Like, what is it that makes you leap out of bed in the mornings?
Yeah, great question. So I love the sport on a personal level, and I've always, loved interacting with sport. But I think from a professional standpoint, what I'm really interested in is that intersection and ways that we can tell interesting stories that fans care about, that are going to add value for brands, and that I think, for me as someone who's really invested in, women in motorsport and women in sport in general, I think partnerships that are taking women seriously and are telling, genuinely interesting, authentic stories. Because I think we've seen a real influx of brands and partners coming into motorsport because it is this hot new thing. And because there are, more brands than ever, you can't just rely on saying, we're here in F1. You actually have to be doing something really interesting. And for me, as someone who has worked on, the fashion lifestyle side and also been really embedded in the F1 paddock, that's where I saw a bit of an opportunity to be helping, I guess, educate and shepherd brands who are trying to find value within the paddock and also speak to women and different groups, because I think there is a lot of really cool work being done, but even more opportunity, in the future for brands.
I think the best activation that I've ever seen was the Lego cars for the parade lap. Yeah, with the drivers. I mean, it's still talked about now, like months and months later, and the drivers still refer back to it from time to time. I think that was just a brilliant sponsor activation in Formula One. Have you got any examples of any other great brand activations that you've seen in your time in the paddock?
The Lego one is definitely, like, I always cite that as well. I think when you're a brand trying to engage with the drivers or find ways to use your driver time, doing something that the drivers are actually going to enjoy is sort of the best way to find value and, drive engagement, because Lego, I think, is such a natural sponsor for F1, but they found a way to engage with the drivers that they found so genuinely exciting. I think it generated like $1 billion+ in earned media or something ridiculous. I've been thinking a lot actually about the Australian Grand Prix. I mean, I'm obviously a little bit biased being Australian, but I think it's been really, really great to see how the AusGP have been really intentional about who they've brought on board as like race partners and how they can activate within the space to genuinely reach all corners of the fan base. I mean, Australia has the highest female attendance of any race on the calendar. And so the AusGP really intentionally went out to brands like Mecca and to La Roche-Posay, and they have worked with them and, you know, American Express and all of their sponsors to sort of complement each other and create something that fans will genuinely really enjoy. I think Australia does it quite well. I mean, I was here for the Australian Open as well, and Mecca had a really great activation there also. And I think it stems from this sort of top-down understanding that, you know, we can take women seriously in sport, and there are ways to connect with them that they will care about, but it's not, you know, singular, it's layered. Women can want to go and watch the sport and care about the drivers and everything that entails, and then also layer in, you know, beauty or fashion or, you know, tech, what have you. So it has been really interesting to see the activations happening here.
I would love to see Formula One do more in the merch space. I know there's merch everywhere, but I don't want to be wearing team merch that looks like I'm trying to be part of the pit crew with logos everywhere. And I think there's a real gap for classy, everyday pieces that fans can wear that might just give a little signal that you're a Formula One fan or a team fan. Like Ferrari do it pretty well. Some Mercedes items I think are pretty nice, but loads of them are just bright, leery, like I said, logos everywhere. And I think it was Carolyn's Corner. She's a Formula One creator on Instagram, has done a little series about merch and this exact same topic as what I'm talking about. Yeah, I'd love to see that. And I think it will happen. I think Formula One just dropped a new line for Miami that, you know, was quite a funky kind of tank top that had a knot on the side. But yeah, I think more can be done there, and I'm excited to see what happens in that space. But from merch, I suppose, and clothes and fashion, parties. Tell us about some of the parties that you've gone to.
Yeah, so when I first started covering F1, as I mentioned, I was sort of doing it through that entertainment pop culture lens. So I think back to the first year in Miami, and that was just chaos because I think, you know, generally speaking, people love a shiny new thing. And it's always interesting when it's a new event. It's not well-trodden ground like the Super Bowl, for example, because, you know, everyone there knows which parties are cool, who's going to go to what. Miami was interesting because you were seeing people all over, and it was also sort of pre the real takeoff of Drive to Survive. So you were seeing drivers out and about, you know, at the club and at parties. A couple of my favorites, I think Carbone Beach, which is an event that happens at the Miami Grand Prix. It is sort of an offshoot of a very popular New York City restaurant, and they've done a really good job of curating this really beautiful experience and curating a really great guest list. I mean, it's a very, very high ticket price, I will say, but it has, you know, consistently been this like really, really high level event. It's a, you know, really beautiful experience, and they always have a surprise musical guest. I've been there on the Sunday of the Miami Grand Prix a couple of times, and we've seen the race winner pop by. I mean, Lando came after his very first win. I was chatting to, you know, Travis Kelce, and it's a real sort of who's who of the celebrity world. And I think it's always interesting when that happens at an F1 event. Even
Sorry,
here,
just going back, sorry to interrupt, but you said a high ticket price. So that means it's a public event, right? Is that what?
yeah, that's correct. So anybody can purchase a ticket. It's obviously, you know, not cheap, but it is an opportunity, I think, for these people who want to be seen as, you know, not tastemakers per se, but people who, you know, have taste and, you know, are involved in the world of Formula One. They can be, you know, similarly to people who are purchasing Paddock Club tickets. It's sort of an indicator of, you know, who you are and, you know, what your interests are. And it's a great opportunity to sort of rub shoulders with these sorts of people. I think that's obviously been, you know, an aspect of what Formula One has represented for a long time, but it's, you know, more stark than ever now that F1 is what it is, particularly in the US.
It's almost like, you know, an indicator that you're part of the inner circle, I guess, if you're able to, you know, get tickets and afford tickets to go to these events.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's been really interesting to watch that conversation evolve. Particularly, I find it interesting around like the influencer conversation, because there has always been, we don't just see it in F1, but across the board, lots of, backlash, if you will. But I always say to people, if you go into Paddock Club, it's, 5% influencers, 95% business people who probably never heard of Max Verstappen until that weekend. So there's always been this aspect of, brands and sponsors inviting people who, maybe they're clients or CTOs or CEOs, or now for brands, it's, influencers, but it's serving the same purpose.
And I asked, how much are the tickets to this event? Because I'm like, how expensive is expensive?
I believe it's $3,000 per head. I could fact check that, but it's somewhere in that realm.
Yeah, no, don't worry. Almost, yeah. Okay. So yeah, if you're getting paddock tickets, you're able to, you're in the same space as us then, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Just curious, because you work a lot with brands, what other female focused brands, or even what other brands would you like to see in Formula One in support of women?
Yeah, good question. I think it doesn't just need to be, beauty and fashion brands, because I think it's not to say women can't be excited or care about that, but I think it can be performative, if you will. I mean, we've been seeing it across the board with the WNBA, for example. They had that season a couple of years ago when Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese were drafted, and suddenly the WNBA was everywhere, and there was this real clamoring for brands to capitalize on it in a way that, now looking back, I've seen some brands that have sort of dipped in and dipped out and haven't made any sort of real effort to actually engage with fans. I think F1, for me, I've found, has played a really key role in getting us to this sort of inflection point for women and sports across the board. I think, not to deep it too much, but I think throughout history, with the advancement of women, we've seen women be able to vote and get credit cards and all these different, major moments. But for a long time, sport has been this world where, it's for boys, and this is still what they own, if you will. And I think we've come to this place where, not only is sport seen as cool and it sort of represents a cultural cachet, but I think we're seeing women demand to be taken seriously, because what I think F1 has really shown is that there's nothing inherently masculine, if you will, about being a fan of this sport. There are so many interesting dynamics and different ways to interact with the sport. And for women, I think I mentioned this earlier, I think generally speaking, women are very dynamic in how they engage with things. And that's why we're seeing, young people and women of all ages wanting to know what's happening with the strategy and, in the garage, but then also caring about the brand landscape and, what's happening with beauty brands and fashion. And I think men, this is a bit of a generalization, but haven't interacted with sport in that way. Historically, they have often just tuned in on a Sunday and that's sort of it. And that's where we're seeing a bit of tension now, because there really isn't a correct way to be a fan. And I think to circle back to answer your question, I think brands that have that top-down understanding and can show that they genuinely understand that, you can have people interact with this sport in all different ways, and we should be taking women seriously. I think more often we're seeing that, it's coming across in a way that is either genuine or it's not. And I think it's easier for women to sort of sniff out those brands that are really trying to capitalize on this trend. So yeah, brands need to be, I think, smarter about how they're doing things. Sorry, that was
any examples like of genuine and not genuine that you just mentioned?
Well, I don't want to call anyone out for, I don't want to. I don't want to
call people out. This is the question.
I think, brands that have bought into F1 and are making an effort to understand the sport. I think looking at the beauty space, I think Elemis came in, they have bought into Aston Martin F1, and I think they're really making an effort to sort of evolve that partnership year on year. I think we have seen other beauty brands, and I mean, Sephora has just announced that they're going to be involved in F1 Academy, and I'm really curious to see what that will look like, because it's not an interesting narrative anymore to say we are a beauty brand in F1, because there are multiple now. That's not interesting. You can't just ride off of that narrative. And I mean, F1 Academy is quite an interesting one for me, because I think there has been this sort of, you know, brands are trying to use the drivers as a bit of a billboard, when there are girls in that series who aren't really into makeup. So it doesn't really make sense for a brand to throw their whole weight behind one female driver and say, look, we're a beauty brand and there are women in F1 and this, you know, makes a lot of sense, when it might not. And so I think you really have to, you know, understand the driver and the team and what the actual message is, and where it genuinely makes sense beyond just women like makeup and there are, you know, women on the grid.
Well, I think I think this is so important. Like, I think it's really great to see female brands in motorsports and supporting female drivers, etc. But women are not just interested in beauty and makeup. So it's really exciting for me to see other brands that are considered more male brands to be backing women and kind of hopefully putting their money where their mouth is. So I 100% agree with all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think conversely, like, I would love to see Elemis do something with Fernando Alonso. I mean, they support the entire Aston Martin F1 team. He is a driver in his 40s. What does his skincare routine look like? I think, you know, it's I don't want to say reductive to just work with female drivers for those brands, but I think, how can we have, you know, male focused brands also, you know, genuinely engaging women, and how can a beauty brand, you know, work with the men in the space? I mean, ultimately, I think it's better for their bottom line if they're trying to engage, you know, a wider demographic. And I think that would be genuinely interesting.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I think that just crossing the boundaries a bit more, and stopping and not being so defined that this is, you know, women only or this is men only or whatever. And I think that male, inverted commas, male brands going into F1 Academy, but not as much in the reverse, as you say. So I think that will be very interesting. And this is what they say. Like, they say that the largest growing percentage of new fans are women. So, you know, you do need to be more diverse, and you do need to be more, you know, open-minded about how women consume content and what they're interested in, as you've been saying. So yeah, seeing what's the space, I suppose.
Just saw that Barilla Pasta have put out a little Formula One car-shaped pasta that's come out. And I remember when they got announced as a major sponsor of the Formula One last year, that Monique, the previous co-host on this podcast, said she didn't like it. Initially, she didn't like seeing Barilla signage because she felt it was too lowbrow. And I thought, and I had the opposite reaction. I thought it was great that a cheap supermarket shelf item or brand like Barilla had a presence in a, elite global juggernaut that is Formula One. I thought it was just brilliant. And so it's just interesting. I think there's massive gaps that brands can fill in Formula One and Formula One Academy, and pets is one. How many dogs do you see in the paddock? Like, so many. Where are the pet food brands? Where are all the pet accessories, the team branded dog collars, things like leads? Oh my God, you could just go crazy there. So
that's a great free idea for somebody who's listening to this podcast.
That's $50, thanks. No more free ideas.
Yeah.
But yeah, things like that. I can't believe that hasn't been done already, to be honest. But scooters, you see them all in the paddock on scooters all the time, things like that. So it's,
I think, as you say, it's about finding the natural, like, integration points. You know, where does it make sense for you to tell a story that already exists in the F1 paddock? You're so right. If a dog company can sponsor Leo Leclerc, I mean, perfect.
Yep. And Alex Albon, the king of pets, can be the face of it.
Does he have loads of pets?
Yeah, he does. He's got something like crazy, 7 cats and 4 dogs, and I think he's got a horse or donkey. I don't know. He's got a lot of different animals and different, and he loves it. Like, he loves all that, which is great.
Yeah.
I do have a question.
Okay.
Just take away all the barriers and just dream big. What's your dream job in Formula One?
Ooh, great question. I have reached a point in my career where I wanted to be a journalist forever, and I think it's been really interesting navigating that wanting to be a different thing. I do think it would be really cool to be in-house at a team working perhaps on marketing strategy, particularly on like the brand side. But you never know. I think it's been really cool to be like the consumer brand side at the moment. Having insight across a lot of different brands. But F1 teams, I mean, are growing in valuation so rapidly. I think there's a lot of really cool stuff that can be done. I think McLaren are doing a really good job with it. They've got a lot of really, really talented people in their marketing team. So I think something like that could be really cool.
Oh. I also wanted to ask you about New York. Like, how long have you lived there? What took you there? Like it's not a very easy place for Australians to live and work. There's a lot of paperwork, etc., that you've got to go through. Yeah, just tell us about your New York.
Yeah, so I moved to New York when I was 19. I have always known I wanted to live there and just made it work. I mean, now it's like almost 10 years on. I look back at, 19-year-old me, and I do think it is quite an achievement. I didn't know anybody. I didn't really have any contacts, but I built it up over time and, have since developed quite a good niche, particularly being, in motorsport, because historically there hasn't been, much of an F1 presence in the US, but the sport is, growing so rapidly there that it has been, quite advantageous to have been in New York for nearly 10 years. And I've also traveled, for the F1 calendar. So it's been, a really, really exciting place to be across all of my different endeavors, but particularly in motorsport, it's a great time to be there.
And do you live on Manhattan Island, or are you outside?
I've always been in Williamsburg in Brooklyn. There's lots of Australians there, I'll be honest, but it's fantastic. I love it.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's dive into the final three. These are the three questions that we ask all the guests that come on Away We Go podcast. So, Emily, if you could go to a Formula One destination for a holiday with no race weekend on, which destination would you choose to go to and why?
It would have to be Japan, just because I've been dying to go there my whole life. I mean, obviously I would love to go to Suzuka. I think it's such an iconic track. I mean, the figure eight, it's so cool. But outside of F1, Japan is top of my list. I've never heard a bad word about anybody who's been there. It's hopefully sometime this year I'll get there. If not, maybe next year, but it's very top of my list.
It's top of mine as well. I haven't been either, and I really, 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 although I feel like I've been because I've written about it, I've researched it, I've, interviewed people about it.
We'll have to plan a girls' trip.
Sounds good.
Oh, yes. I'm in.
Maybe the end of March next year. What do you reckon?
Yeah.
Yeah, Suzuka.
Yeah.
If you could go to any Formula One race, whether it's on the calendar or not on the calendar, which race would you go to and why?
Well, so when I think about growing up watching Formula One, having it on TV, it was in the Michael Schumacher Ferrari era. And so my whole life have wanted to go to Italy for an F1 race. And I've been very lucky to go to Italy quite a few times, but never for the Italian Grand Prix. So I'm dying to get to Monza. I think it's something you have to do to see the Tifosi and to understand what that fandom looks like, because it's so unique and so special. So hopefully this year I can get to Italy for a race.
I agree. Monza's amazing. Yeah. What about you, Ciara?
Yeah, Monza. I mean, I would love to go to Monza. I went to Imola just recently, but for work, but it was so cool to be there. But yeah, Monza definitely top of the list. And I've been to Italy loads, but I feel like it's criminal that I haven't been to Monza.
No, I'm the same. Spent so much time there, but never been to a Formula One race there. Been to a couple of rallies, World Rally Championships, worked on those. But anyway, moving on. All right, now holidays with Formula One drivers. If you could choose to go on a holiday with any F1 driver, dead or alive, who would you choose to holiday with and why?
Okay, so the way that I travel is I love to do things. I have a packed schedule. I like an activity. I think growing up on the Gold Coast, my parents always said to us, if we're going to go on a holiday, we're not going to go lay on the beach because, you know, we're lucky enough to have the beach at home. So I think that philosophy has always stayed with me in the way that I travel now as an adult. So in thinking of a driver who would be on board with that, I think probably like a Daniel Ricciardo. I think he would be a lot of fun. He would be down for activities. You know, I see a lot of the current driver vacation photos, and it definitely looks like a lot of, you know, laying on yachts, which would be amazing. But I definitely really enjoy, you know, activities and, you know, doing 30,000 steps a day and exploring. So yeah, I think Daniel would be a fun one to do that with.
I agree. Well, fabulous. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Emily, on Away We Go podcast. It's been a real treat to hear about your career and your story and your passion for the sport and everything that surrounds the sport as well, you know, from the commercial activities, the sponsors to the cultural and lifestyle aspects of the sport. I'm really excited to see where your career takes you, and I can't wait to hear what your next chapter is all about. So thank you very much.
No, thank you both for having me. I am so appreciative, and I always love getting to talk to other women in motorsport in particular. I think it's such an exciting time, you know, for everybody, especially for Australians, I will say, you know, crossing our fingers for Oscar. But yeah, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for joining again, Ciara, and thank you everybody for having us in your ears. If you've liked what you've listened to, please subscribe to this podcast. You can follow us on all the social media platforms. The links will be in show notes. I'll put links to Emily's Instagram in show notes as well, so you can follow her. And until next week, and until lights out.
It's lights out and away we go.
Away We Go podcast is produced by Dianne Bortoletto.